what you'll hear on Patreon.
I'm probably wrong about this, was just that it's interesting that the higher up you go in the attempt to be kind of high culture, the more you start to culture jam, the more you start to subvert genres and subvert expectations. So it's like, you're not going to get the comfortable narrative here. You're going to get chaos. And it reminds me a little bit. It reminds me a little bit of culture jamming, where it's like, I was talking to somebody recently and I was like, why do they demand like some of these crazy things that are happening in the culture wars? Like, why do people consciously demand things that are so weird and couldn't possibly work? And my friend said, it's culture jamming. That's what they're doing.
I'm a novelist and the author of Twice, a novel. And I'm writing a book of fatal dating tips for the Sublation Media channel. And I've been the host of Fatal Dates, which is a podcast about finding real connection in an unreal world on Sublation.
And I'm Douglas Lain, and I usually introduce myself by telling people that I'm the publisher of Susanna Kleeman. That usually goes over really big with people. And they say, you mean the novel Twice? And I say, yes, exactly. I published a novel Twice. And then I might also mention that I'm also a novelist, and I'm now the head of Sublation Media. I run a YouTube channel for Sublation Media, which this is going to be on, at least part of it. And let's see what else. I'm a contrarian. I am a Twitter warrior. I am a casualty of Elon Musk. These are the things that I tell people. At least that's what I'm saying now.
And what you'll be telling your grandchildren in the years to come. Yeah. Saying, yes, I was a casualty of the Twitter wars. Sit down, my children. Right. I shall tell you a tale.
Noble badge. Anyway, now I heard they're going to charge everybody to use Twitter. So that's the end.
Not me, because I'm kicked off. They can't even take my money.
You try to break this glass, please. Yeah. Sure? Yeah. Oh my fucking God. Well, maybe that was a little too hard.
The idea for today's show came from Doug and I discussing why it is that I cannot watch horror movies or scary movies, whatever you want to call them, or slasher films, and yet I can watch in great detail true crime and sort of look at the real blood of real human being splattered on the walls. And I have no problem with that. And my husband thinks that I'm insane.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Her arms were cut off. Her legs were cut off. Her ears were cut off. Her tongue was cut off. Her nose was cut off. Her eyeballs were plucked out.
And I wondered, am I diagnosable? What do you think?
Well, I'm just writing some notes here to tell myself that's so interesting what you just said. Sorry, I'm just leaping in here. I'd written some other notes in thinking about the topic of all of this before, but as soon as you said that, I thought, no, of course, it's totally obvious why that should be. Because horror is disorder, and it's about being out of control. And true crime is the opposite of that. It's about being the detective. It's having the analytical tools to solve what's happened and to work it out. So you just saying that makes me feel that horror films, which I've got to say, I don't have such a problem watching horror films. I don't find them that scary, I should say. And true crime, I am more gripped by. But so we wouldn't want to be saying, of course, that all women are like this. But it does seem to me that to watch a horror film is to immerse yourself in the experience of losing control and being at the mercy of the film itself, because it's fiction also, as opposed to true crime, where you get to be the analytical Marxist detective who provides solutions and can tie everything up. That would just be me as an untrained psychologist, what I might say.
I too like, I like detective stories, and I especially like television serials where there is a detective at the center, and watching the detective and identifying with the detective as they solve crimes. I went through a period where I got the BBC app, or the BritBox it's called, if you're in the United States, where you can watch old British television programs. And I just went through a series of watching one detective series after another. Sometimes I would wear out if the detective was too stoic, too despondent, too much of a sad sack. But there was one with Peter Davison, which I quite liked. You know, the old Doctor Who, the fifth, sixth Doctor, something like that. And overall, I like to identify with a detective who's doesn't seem too clever, but is clever and can solve crimes. But I'm not that compelled by the crimes. Don't have to be grisly. There was one about it was always a locked room mystery each time, and a magician's assistant was the detective,
Mhm.
and I quite enjoyed that. So I can identify with the love of true crime if what we're talking about is detective stories. But it seems to me that the women who I've talked to who talk about enjoying true crime are as fascinated by the grisly figure of the criminal as they are by the detective,
The criminal's not always a man, are they, Doug? Sometimes the criminals are women, right?
I guess. I don't know.
We're not in the true
In
crime.
real life, certainly, yeah, but more often men in real life. And my understanding is that the serial killer is typically a man in one of these programs. And
Well, you say that, but Ashley will know there's been an amazing story gripping Britain, the story of nurse Lucy Letby, a different, perhaps, sort of serial killer to the one that you were thinking about. She was a nurse, and she was a nurse in the part of the hospital that very premature, very ill, very, very tiny babies were. And she appears to have she's just been convicted for murdering a lot of
oh, yeah. Most serial killers, the number one profession for serial killers happens to be nurses, I believe.
Oh, Lucy, is it? Yes. Hello, my name's Chester, please. Can you step in 2 seconds?
Yes.
Lucy Letby, a nurse in the UK, will spend the rest of her life in prison for murdering 7 babies and trying to kill 6 others.
Driven to Kill: British Serial Killers and Their Occupations. The Howard Journal of Crime and Justice, Lyons and Wilson, 2015. It was determined that there are 4 particular occupational groups that known British serial murderers selected, and these are described as healthcare, business, public and personal service, and driving and transient dependent work. It is this latter occupational grouping that was the most commonly selected form of employment. Brave Clarice: Healthcare, Serial Killers, Patterns, Motives, and Solutions. Forensic Science, Medicine, and Pathology. Mansawi and Mansawi, 2022. There are 2 main defining psychological characteristics of a serial killer, which are compartmentalization and dehumanization. To neutralize feelings of guilt, serial killers compartmentalize. This allows them to develop 2 distinct social circles. 1, a close circle of friends or family whom they care about and typically do not harm, and 2, a victim group, strangers to whom they have no remorse. A modern example includes Nazi doctors who used doubling to create 2 distinct selves, one that engaged in experimentation and extermination of inmates, and another that maintained their life outside of concentration camps. Physicians are suggested to be more susceptible to doubling than any other profession. The medical profession requires one to act objectively and mundanely in the presence of blood, trauma, and corpses. This allows for desensitization to death and an ability to maintain highly skillful cognitive function under circumstances that may otherwise be deemed abhorrent or reprehensible in the eyes of laypeople. The physician, therefore, develops a medical self. In the case of prolific medical serial killer Dr. Michael Swango, who killed up to 60 patients under his care, he described in his diary how the sweet, husky, close smell of indoor homicide served as a reminder that he was still alive.
And my ex was a nurse, so I think that explains everything. But
Oh,
Yes, but as I've said to you before, Doug, seem to have noticed you can cut all of this bit out. Ashley.
no, we don't have to cut this.
But what I was going to say is,
It's not on my channel.
I noticed that your ex was a nurse, and other people that you have gone out with have been therapists. It seems to me that you enjoy surrounding yourselves with the caring professions. But we're going off the topic here. So
Well, I'm going to, my girlfriend now is a psychoanalyst, and I would say that psychoanalysis is unique as a form of therapy because it has nothing whatsoever to do with making you feel better. So there's
The opposite of care in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Listen, I wanted to
picking
go
you
back-
apart.
what to talk about the difference between horror films and true crime. It does, I've been allowed to appear on this Ablation channel. I have been so impressed with both of you. Very analytical thinkers, very clear thinkers, people who are very idealistic also and know that there are solutions to things. Therefore, the joy is to be in something where there is a solution. It would seem to me, perhaps I'm being rude, for people of a very dialectical, material, Marxist trained mindset. There's a solution. You've just got to work hard enough to get to it, as opposed to the realms of Korean horror films where all sorts of evil sprites might come in and do all sorts of terrible things, and it might all end up badly in the end.
Yeah, if
Because-
there's no resolution, I'm not watching. Like, if
Well-
I know that there's no solution at the end, I don't watch.
Well,
I
and
have
I
to.
know from-
I need it all tied up in a neat little bow.
Yeah. No, and I know from going on our fatal date, Ashley, I know that the drive is to resolve things, not just for yourself, for other people. There's a tremendous that it seems to me is a lot about what drives you. So the idea of absolute chaos, destruction, horror, everybody dead in the log cabin at the end, that doesn't seem a very on-brand Ashley Frawley's kind of story. I can see that.
No. I suppose the line between chaos and everything being controlled for me is the most terrifying thing. That I feel like for my husband can watch these sorts of things, horror movies and so on, because for him, there's no ironically, so there's no reality to it, right? But for me, that seems real. Like it's going to really, really happen. Like I could fall into this chaos and I feel this terror of falling into this chaos. So I don't like to watch.
Haven't you already fallen into chaos? Isn't that what life is? I mean, as somebody trained and very empirical and very impressive background, as the pair of you have wrangled your minds through, I think chaos is less frightening to me. I'm very aware that all I am is in chaos all the time, and that's okay. Is that not what your experience of life is?
No, I mean, like my young experience of life is very chaotic. And so I am always living in, it was actually quite nice. My early childhood was really, really nice. And then it fell into chaos. And I always fear that it will fall into chaos again. So this idea of like an uncontrolled world where just anything can happen is so terrifying to me. It's so real to me. It's such a real terror. I cannot just let go. Whereas I can watch the aftermath of that when all the horror is gone. And then we have the controlled analysis that comes afterward, where we see, okay, it's all over now. We can piece it together. We're going to resolve the situation. But everything is clean. And
But that's just an illusion, isn't it? That's the illusion, the joy of data, that there is a finite amount of information. We will get there. Whereas in fact, there's an infinite amount of information and controlled by data, and perhaps even controlled by analyzing the situation is just never actually going to resolve anything, even though we like to.
No. You enough information and enough heads together, we will eventually find solutions. I love that. It's so hopeful.
I don't remember who said this. Maybe it was Christopher Lasch, but I may be misattributing it. But there was a social critic who noticed that before the middle to the late 20th century, the aim of the left, maybe, and of society overall, was to create systems of protection and control and to make order in the world. But after World War II and beyond, during the period of the consumer society and the administrated state, there was a turn away, especially amongst the middle classes and the upper middle classes, from order and systemization, and a longing after chaos, because it was the one thing they didn't have, because they lived in such an administrated, controlled world. So I think that it might speak to your level of feeling restricted went to the degree to which you long for the chaos of horror or some cathartic break into.
I don't long for the chaos of horror. I feel I am living in chaos. I feel I've only ever lived in chaos. And that's not because I've had, touch wood, I've been lucky. I've not had particularly chaotic, but, it seems to me that life is uncontrollable, and anything can happen at any moment, and it is unreasonable, and there's a certain amount that logic is not going to, logic is just a solace. It's a nice solace and it's a good one. Anyway, that's what
I tend to think that when you say something like, well, everything is chaos, make that your substance in your life, like that the truth is chaos. That's because, the truth is the level below appearance. And when you're saying the truth is chaos, it's probably because you have a very ordered life. And so the real truth underneath it all, is this chaos, which you can long for, that's more authentic. And then, whereas if you're living in true chaos and you're actually experiencing it, then you might fantasize, oh, underneath it all, there's an order. God has a plan for me. Everything's okay.
Yes, this is it. I long for order. I don't get it. I want to do the same thing every day. I want
to do the same thing every day. I know that's the way to live, and I also want to get up really early while doing it. I know that that's the way.
Yeah, so I long for that, and I can see this in the way that I understand reality. That underneath all of this apparent chaos, there is an order and a structure that I can understand, and if I can understand it, I can control it.
It's an illusion,
and that's Marxism, right? That if we cannot, this is why I love Marx, right? He says that if we can understand it, we can make history in the full light of reason. We can, by understanding the world, that's the only way forward, is to understand and therefore control. And this will free us from the chaos of production, the current sort of chaos of what's the word? Anarchy of production, right? There is a way out.
Let us not retreat into Marxism so early in the conversation. I'm taking over like all this patriarchal energy.
But you're the guy.
Hybristophilia. I want to talk about hybristophilia. It's a paraphilia involving sexual interest and the attraction to those who commit crimes.
Joining us now to explain relationships like this, psychologist Dr. David Holmes. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Why would a woman on the outside want to have a relationship with a man like this?
There's something called hybristophilia. It's a paraphilia.
Right, this is already confusing.
It's not really a disorder, it's more of a condition. It's a kind of thing where, in evolutionary terms, females are often, not always, but often, attracted to fairly brutal, caveman-like characters.
Well, you know about that.
It's it just is a trait. It's because
sorry.
Because it was adaptive.
It's one thing to be attracted to a man who is strong and will defend you, but this is a man who is, has a history of violence behind him.
But it is the same kind of identity.
Charles Manson was 80 years old, in prison on death row. Got love letters from 26-year-old Afton Elaine Burton, and then they married. She came to him and they married in prison. A lovely picture of him here with his bride, the little swastika on his forehead. And so I wonder, am I completely off base in saying that one of the reasons why the serial killer true crime genre is appealing to women is because of hybristophilia?
Rampant hybristophilia in the female population. Is that what your secret?
That's my theory. They're like the really bad boys. The really, really bad boys.
Well, I think the reason why it deserves a name and a discussion is because I assume it is so rare. It is not a common thing. Like, a good percentage of the population of women are like, do you know what I really want? I want a serial killer. I don't think so. So I think it's probably misguided to find some deep female essence in a weird love of serial killers. But of course, there is a far less obvious, a far more common way that this manifests, and that is the love of the rule breaker, the bad boy, all of that sort of thing. Which incels love to wax lyrical on. And I don't know, Susanna, if you think that that's particularly common or just a stereotype and a cliche.
Well, I totally agree with you. I really don't think, no matter what Doug's wild imaginings are, that basically, secretly, the female population of the world is just swooning over pictures of Charles Manson and wanting nothing better than their own personal bad boy in there. But I think some women are interested in it, and one could extrapolate and start making arguments that could tend to be talking in general about female heterosexual behavior, which I sense is what Doug wants to hear discussed. I tell you what I think about it. I think, first of all, some people are just fame whores, and Charles Manson is famous, and I would as basically as that I would start. The other thing I would say is there's something to some women, to a very few women perhaps, but there's something very attractive about men in prison, which is where they are, right? They are bad.
They're not cheating on you. They're in prison.
They're not cheating on you. That basically there's an identification with the woman, the kind of very controlling desire the woman has. What is very attractive is where they are. They're in prison. The women, to some extent, have become elided with the prison state, with the warders. They're doing the same bidding. You know where they are. They're bad boys, but you know exactly where they are at all times. And you also know that they're really bored and are desperate for a bit of attention. And I would say, therefore, what those men really are is virtual. They're kind of virtual fantasy figures. They don't exist. They're not in the world. You can't bump into them. You can't worry they're having a drink with their ex or anything like that. They exist not in a real place, prison. You can write to them. You have to communicate with them through virtual means, not direct means. And also they're incredibly desperate. And so that for a certain perhaps kind of person, woman, whoever, who might be feeling, I don't think it's something intrinsically to do with women, but women who are sitting at home who might be feeling a bit bored, keen to have a fantasy relationship.
This is the 26-year-old woman who's getting ready to marry 80-year-old Charles Manson. Her legal name is Afton Burton, but Manson has named her Star.
Are you in love?
Yeah.
Did you?
Why would I marry somebody if I was?
Well, I'm just asking.
Okay.
People get married for all kinds of different reasons in this country.
I guess so. Well, I wouldn't.
When we first met Star several years ago, she told us that she was drawn to Manson because of his environmental philosophy that he calls ATWA.
ATWA stands for air, trees, water, and animals.
Did you know that 900 redwood trees get cut down every day? 900 redwood trees at 1,000 years apiece. That's 900,000 years of sunlight you're taking off of this planet.
But after 7 years of living near Manson's prison, Star's main focus now is to clear her future husband's name and get him out of prison. She says he is innocent.
And also where they are at all times and know that they're not seeing other women, although maybe there's other women writing to them and that will make you furious. So I think that's part of the attraction. And then I think, and here we're constrained to the unacceptable territories, I think that there is also something potentially attractive about violent male criminals, which is, this is really unacceptable. There's a lot of men who are kind of a bit bored of women. They can satisfy themselves with porn, whatever. You can have women. You don't need women. You can have a machine to do it as well as a woman. Who fucking cares? But someone who would actually go out and stalk women, rape women, kill women, that person's clearly got some awake, alert desire, if you see what I mean. So that person becomes that because that person is actually interested in women. And I think for some women, they enjoy that somebody might be very interested in them. That's almost more appealing to them than the size of that person's biceps. So I don't know how unacceptable what I just said is, but so it's a sort of, in my mind, there's like these wolves. Oh, the wolf is after me. I'm a delicious piece of meat to this wolf. But the wolf is now very safely ensconced in a prison where I know that they're not actually doing anything with any other bits of meat, and perhaps they're probably being re-educated. So this is a wolf, a man who has very strong desires, and maybe me and my egocentricity can think that I'm the one of all the others. If only he could have channeled his desire in the correct way, it would have been towards me. So in the end, I think it's a massively egocentric fantasy. I wanted to know just how unacceptable that was, what I just said to you.
I don't know.
I didn't find it bad at all. It's perfectly aligned with my own thinking. Go ahead.
I mean, look,
but then it must be good.
As far as offending people goes, like women who date serial killers are probably fair game. So you probably don't have to be like, there's a constituency of women who love rapists that are going to be real mad about this. Like, I think that we're probably safe that they're not going to come for us.
Okay, fine. Phew. Thank you.
Well, can I now be the offensive one then?
Oh God. Let's just take turns. Just get my channel thrown off the air. Go for it, Don.
Well, psychologist Leon Seltzer, this is from Wikipedia, has offered explanations for the phenomenon of male serial killers attracting female sex partners based on evolutionary psychology. Everyone's favorite.
Yeah,
Serial
that's your
killers-
favorite.
No, I'm not. I don't. No, I'm a Marxist. I'm not allowed to believe in
That's right,
evolution.
Doug. That's right.
Only
We just report him to the Marxist police. He's always bringing it up. I think he might not be a true Marxist. That's my fear. Wouldn't want me to be associating with him too much in that case. Sorry, you were saying.
Listen, I only like in late at night, whisper the word evolutionary psychology before I go to sleep at night. I don't really believe it.
When you're really in a corner, out
Yeah.
you bring your evolutionary psychology wares.
So anyhow, evolutionary psychology says that serial killers are alpha males that tend to attract women. This is because such males could protect women and their offspring, according to evolutionary history. Seltzer says women today may consciously realize that it's unwise to date a serial killer, but they're nevertheless attracted to them. Stated, as a therapist, I've encountered many women who bemoaned their vulnerability toward dominant men who consciously they recognized were all wrong.
So I think this is kind of straying into the territory of like there are women who consciously know that the man that they're with has done something really terrible, but he's locked up and now he's safe and he's being reformed. But then, as I said, you're straying into the territory where you could be saying that women who are abused somehow want it. And is that not what this person is essentially saying?
Well, I think that the woman who married Charles Manson probably was she either like brain damaged or she kind of knew that he was not a safe bet.
He's 80 though. He's 80 and in prison.
Yeah.
He's a pretty safe bet now.
Yeah, okay.
He's like a kind of Hugh Hefner when he was 80. He's just a thing. And perhaps, some of this is just about, oh yeah, I hear that some women like serial killers. Okay, maybe I'm one of those women who like serial killers. It's just a story that again gets regurgitated and becomes almost therefore permitted because of it. But I really think that Charles Manson at 80.
Breaking news, Charles Manson, the infamous cult leader who led a string of murders in the 1960s, is dead. ABC's Lindsay Davis is here with the latest details. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning to you, Robin. He was sentenced to death 46 years ago. But just months after that sentence, California Supreme Court declared the death penalty unconstitutional, prolonging the life of one of the most reviled men in American pop culture. And overnight, at 83 years old, Charles Manson died of natural causes.
Okay, let me take another stab at answering that question. And let me take another stab, I say, when I'm talking about serial killers.
At loose behind the scenes ablation media. Who could it have been, Ashley? We need a detective to
the
step
detective.
I'm
is
just waiting. I can see the comments underneath. Like, these are people's lives here. People are dying, and you guys are laughing about knives. And yeah,
No, they were talking about a television program. We're not talking about
Doug's stab. I'm really sorry. Go ahead, stab away.
All right. So, in a different context, when it comes to relationships, like with normal relationships, where neither partner is a criminal, right? But
we're all
let's say
criminals.
I'm not a criminal. I have not committed any acts of any illegal acts. I've not broken any laws. I'm not Russell Brand. I'm not a criminal.
You've never done any bad thing to anybody.
That's not the same thing. I'm a sinner, but I'm not a criminal. There's a distinction. But in the realm of the sinners, okay, rather than the criminals, people who do true acts of violence. But let's say I have a relationship and it ends badly, and I start to say, that my ex, the nurse, was really secretly a serial killer and she treated me wrong. And someone says to me, well, what was it about her that you found so appealing then, if she was so awful? I might reflect on it and go, well, perhaps in some ways the things that might have been red flags were also what compelled me to be with her. Like that,
But that's always the way until you do the full inventory of yourself. That is what people's experience in general, just to make massive generalizations of relationships, is the red flag the bad thing is what attracts you because it is reinforcing something that happened to you, perhaps in your childhood, perhaps earlier. And it becomes almost the fetish object when you see that, because each time what you're hoping to do is to overcome that bad thing, as women writing to Charles Manson in prison are hoping to do. The desire, kind of, when you enter a relationship and the desire is to reform the person, or this time to get it right, from the get-go, you know that's a sick, bad relationship, don't you think?
Right. Well, I mean, we should note that we're breaking now from the evolutionary psychology explanation of things, and we're talking about maybe a little more psychoanalytically, like people are repeating their traumas, they're trying to work through internal difficulties out in the world, they're seeking out the things that meet their expectations based on, childhood or adolescence, or even previous relationships as an adult, because they haven't fully become self-conscious of their own motivations. Now we're moving on to a different kind of explanation.
Well, I'm so pleased to be in the company of proper Marxists, noting, analyzing, and doing everything properly, and not just people gliding around from silly topic to silly topic. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's not silly topic.
I said they're not silly topics. That's not what I said.
This is exactly the kind of thing my ex did, and not true at all.
I wondered, so I know that we're talking about sort of why women might be attracted to this whole world of darkness and crime and murder and so on, either in a fictional form or in a very real guise, albeit very safe. But I wondered, sort of shifting over to the male point of view, why do so many men not seem to have a problem with the horror genre? So my husband thinks I'm crazy because I can watch true crime and it can be really horrible and real, and I don't have a problem. And I explained it's because it's all very clinical and I can be part of the solution. And it's all very rational and so on. So then I wonder, well, why do you watch this uncontained, horrifying world of great detail? I am scarred internally from listening to Saw being played in the next room like 15 years ago or more. I could not watch the movie. I was in the next room and I could hear it. And they watch this for pleasure.
I know. And also video games are very violent and horrific also, I find.
So Doug, answer for all men, please.
Okay. Well, I'm not a connoisseur of the horror movie, slasher movie, but my kids love them. My oldest son liked to watch them, and they had me sit down and watch Friday the 13th, the first Friday the 13th, with, I believe that's the name. It was Kevin Bacon is in it, and he gets murdered. It was a slasher movie. You knew what was going to happen, because whenever a couple would pair off and go off to fool around, you knew they were both going to get it, right? And what was enjoyable about it was watching the murder, watching the knife go through Kevin Bacon's chest, or watching someone get decapitated.
Really? You actually, that was the enjoyable thing to see.
Yes,
Really?
and it always got laughed. Okay, I think it's important to, it was relatively realistically done, but what I found terrible about the movie, like it truly made me feel anxious, was not so much seeing the murder, but the buildup where you knew that the character was done for, and you're just waiting to see how they were going to be done in. Like you knew, okay, she's going into the locker room alone, and we know she's going to be murdered. How is it going to happen? And then the appeal of it was to up the ante each time, so something even more extreme and grotesque and horrible would happen, and maybe elaborate. Like this time the telephone was stuffed into her mouth all the way till it went out the back of her neck, or a pen was jabbed into her ear, and then
so
blood.
Because I wonder, is any of this a metaphor for sex?
Oh, obviously it was so much about sex. It was all about sex and punishing, people for their sexuality. That was what
Interesting.
these movies are all about.
Visit patreon.com/Ashley A. Frawley for part 2.